Welcome to my playroom and to the next video in the Feeding Kids with ADHD course. Eating can be really hard for kids with ADHD and adults too. I'm gonna give you 5 reasons why, and we're gonna address those in this course, Feeding Kids with ADHD. I'm Dr. Taylor. I talk about healthy relationships with food for kids, and I also talk a lot about feeding kids with ADHD, which is why we're here. The first reason why eating can be really hard for someone with ADHD is sensory needs. Sensory difficulties are more common in kids with ADHD than neurotypical kids, but how much more common is hard to say. Stay tuned for more videos on sensory processing challenge in kids with ADHD, how they affect eating, and what supports we can put in place for our kids and for ourselves. So sensory challenges that can affect eating can include issues with texture, so like the actual texture of food or hands and face getting dirty or have certain foods on them. Sensitivity to noises, so like cooking noises, like the vent fan can be overwhelming, really noisy restaurants can be overwhelming. Smell sensitivity, so certain really odoriferous or strong smelling foods can be off-putting. Being a vestibular or proprioceptive seeker, which is really common in kids with ADHD. They may seek or crave movement like heavy work, spinning, or crunchy foods, and this can manifest as like difficulty sitting still. Fidgeting, not wanting to sit down while they eat, or difficulty completing a meal if you require them to sit. Interoception challenges, so this includes difficulty recognizing body cues. Related to food, this would look like forgetting to eat or drink, forgetting to eat until you're like starving, difficulty recognizing when you're full, mixing up the hunger or thirst cues, and even regularly eating past fullness. This is also a whole separate video. It's a really interesting topic too. And yes, these are all things that can also happen to neurotypical people. Everybody has sensory needs, but sensory challenges happen more often and to a greater degree of intensity in people with ADHD. Number 2 reason why eating is hard for people with ADHD, medication. Some medications like Dexedrine, Ritalin, and Adderall can cause a decreased appetite. This can make adequately fueling your body exceptionally challenging, especially for a young kid. So I have a whole video posted on this. It's already published. You can check it out here, and I've got lots of really helpful tips and tricks there. Number 3 reason why eating can be really hard for someone with ADHD is executive functioning difficulties. Executive functioning abilities do grow over time as kids age, but kids with ADHD tend to have more difficulties with these skills than kids who don't have ADHD. I'm going to go through 8 of these executive functioning skills and name some of the eating and feeding challenges that might go along with them. Difficulties with task initiation. Kids who struggle with this may have a hard time stopping what they're doing to take a break to ask for a meal or get a snack themselves. For older kids, they may have a hard time stopping like their video games or playing outside or watching TV to feed themselves. Task execution. Kids who struggle with this may have difficulty like completing the process of putting a meal together, completing the process of putting a lunchbox together. They may leave things unfinished on the counter, and they may have trouble completing a multi-step recipe, even if it's a simple one. Organization. Kids who struggle with this may struggle with packing their own lunchbox, remembering to bring their snacks or their lunchbox to school, keeping track of their snacks in like a locker, backpack, or a sports bag, completing a multi-step recipe, and they may also struggle with food safety once they get to the age where they start cooking, like making sure we're keeping the raw meats away from the produce or making sure we're keeping flammable things away from the stove, for example. Focus. I feel like this is probably the most common executive function challenge when people think about ADHD. So kids who struggle with this may struggle with eating a full meal or a snack before they move on to another activity, eating a meal or snack without getting distracted, or they may have trouble like making it through the school lunch, or they may have trouble with like they just want to talk the whole school lunch and they can't sit down and focus on their school lunchbox, and so they frequently come home with a full lunchbox or an uneaten lunchbox. Time blindness. I struggle with this a lot. So this would look like forgetting to eat, not leaving enough time to eat breakfast before they have to leave for school, not properly fueling themselves in the right time windows before a sporting event for like our older teen athletes, working or playing through mealtime or snack times if the parent is not like on top of keeping a schedule, talking through lunch instead of eating, underestimating the time that it takes to like pack their lunch for school or complete a recipe, and then once they're cooking, forgetting things in the oven or the microwave or on the stove. Okay, I have 3 left, so stick with me here because these are important. Working memory. Kids with ADHD ADHD may have trouble with working memory. So this would be like completing the steps of a recipe or having to check the recipe a bajillion times to remember what temperature to heat the oven to or how long the food needs to be cooking in the oven or on the stove or in the microwave. 2 more, okay? Impulse control. So this might look like eating only what's immediately available in front of them. So not taking the time to prepare a food item. It's like if you open the fridge, what's right in front of them, that's what's eaten. What's sitting on the counter, that's what's eaten, instead of taking the time to like think about what would make your body feel good, what can I make with the ingredients in the fridge. Some people with ADHD may react rashly or urgently, which is this impulse control, and that is associated with disordered eating and binge eating in the scientific literature. And the last executive function I'm going to mention is emotional regulation. And you may be like, how does that affect food? Well, I will tell you. Difficulties with emotional regulation and negative emotion partly explain the relationship between ADHD and disordered eating. And I have this really good graph from this article I'm going to post on the screen here so you can see, because I think it's a good visual. I wanted to highlight this because in this case, targeting the underlying behavior or issue, which would be the emotional regulation, is a way to target the food-related issue that somebody with ADHD might be having. This is a great example of how sometimes the solution to a challenge with food has nothing to do with food itself. Reason number 4 that eating is harder in people with ADHD is that there is a much higher risk for eating disorders in this population. While there are many things that may affect someone's risk for an eating disorder, including genetics, this link between ADHD and eating disorders may be partly due to these struggles with executive functioning that I just mentioned. And last but not least, the 5th reason why eating is harder for people with ADHD is that people with ADHD may turn to food as a coping mechanisms for just the everyday life challenges that they experience living with ADHD. So it's kind of like a result of the previous 4 that I mentioned. Now, it's normal to eat in response to emotions. But if food is someone's only coping skill for these difficulties, they may end up frequently eating beyond fullness to the point of discomfort, eating in the absence of hunger, and even engaging in disordered eating behaviors or eating disordered behaviors like binging. Now, here's another example where the solution here isn't necessarily something food related. Working with a therapist or another healthcare provider to develop a set of coping skills that extend beyond just food is something that will be really useful here. Again, this is for kids and adults too. So there's 5 reasons why eating may be difficult for people with ADHD. I wanted to make this video just to illustrate why. Like if you have ADHD or your kid has ADHD and you find eating to be especially challenging and you feel really frustrated about it, like we have evidence-based reasons for why that is the case. If you liked this video and you found it helpful, make sure to like and subscribe so the algorithm brings you back here, and stay tuned for more Feeding Kids with ADHD videos in this course. Oh, and don't forget to comment if you have questions, because I'll be hanging out in the comment section too. Okay, bye.